forward. So this specific workshop is designed to help you guys constantly like keep your business at a high level or up level your business, right? When I started off with very like middle lower income, and this was something my manager was like very focused with me on, like how to not only get better people, but also like making it really easy for you to always have more appointments ahead of you without having like hours and hours and hours and hours of phone jam all the time, right? Like we knew that like when it was a big push, you know, obviously we put in the time to make calls to like load up so that then we could do 5 calls before and after each demo, and we could do 20 calls each morning and have like maintenance calls, right? Versus having to do 200 to 300 calls like every day or every other day or something, which is not super sexy, you know, or fun. And so I'm going to go ahead and attach this here into the chat, and I'll go ahead and share screen here in a second. Let me go ahead and put this file that I'm going to walk through. And this is probably one of my favorite things. I haven't even taught this in so long, and it was like such an impact to my business. And so I want to show you guys what this, you know, how to do this, what this looks like, you know, how to really capitalize on this. So let me grab that for ya. Let's see here. It doesn't want to connect. Okay. Did it go in the chat? All right, cool. So this is, so always having more of the best appointments, right? And so this is leveling up your customer base, right? Like you always have more of the best appointments. How do we make that easy? And so this is, and I'm going to walk you guys through a 4-step process that is really simple. It will take 10 to, you know, probably about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, but it's the best 10 to 15 minutes that you can spend, you know, once you get your referrals. Okay. So rewind before this is, we can't forget that when you guys are getting referrals, you need to make sure that you're, you know, brainstorming for what you want, right? Like, oh, who do you know that lives in blank neighborhood? Who do you know that's an architect? Who do you know that's home during the day? Like whatever it is that's important to you. And I would even make a slide that you don't have to go through in the beginning, you know, or maybe it's the last slide in your slide deck, but like you can always go back to at the end when you explain the sponsorship, and let them go after it on their own. And then when they're like, oh, okay, I'm at 7 or I'm at, you know, or I'm done or whatever, they're like, oh, Miss Susie, hold on one second. And then you can pull up the slide, because it was always something we did after. And it said, who do you know that? And it has all the different questions of like people that you want to meet, right? And so that would be depending on, you know, your business and what you have going on, you change those questions, but the more specific you can make those to yourself and what you want, the happier you're going to be with your business, right? So don't forget that. But what I'm talking about is doing some kind of a version. It doesn't have to be like an actual sheet. All right, you guys, make sure you guys can see this, but just questions on a slide like this that say like, who do you know that knows everybody? Who do you know that's super nice? Who do you know that loves to cook? Like, are you guys looking at this real quick? Take a glance, but just like putting questions on a slide, you know, of like the types of people, neighborhoods, areas, times, like whatever it is that you're looking to build your business with, be intentional, ask for it, right? So visuals are always great, you know, so this was a sheet that Donovan had made years ago. So first you always ask for recommendations, right? And then you let them go, because they're always going to put whoever they think, you know, would be good at first. And then when they're quote unquote done, you know, that's when we're like, oh, we used to call this the rec sheet hand back, like because it was on a physical paper, they were writing leads. So we'd hand them the sheet back and we'd say, awesome. Now, Miss Susie, who do you know that won't buy, but they're super sweet like you? And I'm like, actually, I have this, some thought joggers here, some different questions. I'm just going to run through them super quick just to see who else pops up for you. Cool. And so who do you know that knows everybody? Who do you know that loves to cook? Who knows super nice? Who do you know that has expensive taste? You know, who do you know that loves to shop? Who do you know that just redid their kitchen? And it would be at that pace. It was quick, cool. It's not a slow thing. I'm not like, Ilani, who do you know that knows everybody? Long, awkward pause. Who do you know that, you know, like you're not doing that, right? Like when we're thought jogging with you guys in training, we do pause because we want you guys to like get to a ton. So here it's just, you're just going through real quick and then like, oh, and sometimes you ask a question and when you're like, oh, who do you know who could send their kids a prize? Like, oh, I have the directory, and they go grab it and you're like, yes, and so they can think of more like that. But, do you have a slide is what I would say first in terms of like, who are the people? So add that, right? Like whether it's a sheet or a slide, I would just put it on your slideshow. Again, in the beginning, you're not going to walk through it. But at the end, once you explain the sponsorship and ask for recommendations, you guys can pull that up when they're quote unquote done and say, oh, Miss Susie, real quick, who do you know? Be like, I'm trying to get more people during the day. I'm trying to get people in the, I'm like, can I read these real quick just to see if they thought jog anyone else that you might know that fits these? I'm like, again, I'm not looking for anyone you think would buy, just super sweet people, that might meet these criteria, right? And so you go through. So once you have made the list as big as you can and you're done, then we go to this. Cool. So step one is qualifying recommendations. So knowing, like when you know more about them, it helps you build stronger connections in the beginning, and it strengthens this cycle as well as it helps develop long-term clients. So like when you know about them prior, when you call them, and I'm like, I call Ilani and I'm like, oh, hey, like I had a customer of mine that recommended me to her friend in New York, actually. And she said she made the best. I said, what's something random that like only their friends know about them? Like that was a question I used to ask people, like, hey, like when you ask for the best 5, like who are the best people? So you might, if they give you 100 people, you might not have time to qualify all those, right? And so if they gave me 100, I would say, Miss Susie, who are the top 10? If you were me, who are the top 10 out of these 100 that you would definitely see, right? But besides that, I'm always asking for like their top 5. If it's under 20 to 30 recs or less, like I'm just asking for the top 5 to 7 people. All right. If it's a huge list, then I might ask for a little bit more. But I just say, hey, if you were me, Ilani, like, or if I was your daughter, all right, or if you were starting this job, who are the 5 people that you're like, you have to see them, right? And I'm like, tell me about them real quick. Like, what is something that just their friends know about them? So I can just make a note, right? And then when I call them and I was chatting with them, I'm like, oh, hey, is this Ilani? I'm like, hey, it's Cathy, Christen. I'm like, I don't know if my name rings a bell, but Julie and Scott Doan had told me to give you a call because they thought you could help me out with something I'm doing this summer. I'm like, did she get to tell you, that I'd be calling? And most of the time they're like, oh no. I'm like, oh my gosh, no. And then when I got good at this, they were like, oh yeah. I was like, oh heck yeah. Like, I know she's been super busy. So awesome. I'm like, I'm so excited she got to let you know. Like, well, she did tell me that you make the best blue martinis in all of New York, and she started laughing. She's like, she told you that? Like, yeah, and I had another customer, they were like, she makes the best pies. Oh my gosh. One lady was like, oh, her husband's in a quartet, and they like all love to sing. Like, it's just like random, like just something that their friends know. But I'm like, is this the quartet singing, whatever? I don't even remember what I said when I called, but they're just laughing. But like right away, they knew, like, I knew them, right? And I'm like, oh, Miss Susie, I'm like, well, she said for me to call you because she said that you make the best apple pies and that you could mail me one. And she started laughing and she's like, what? I'm like, no, I'm just kidding. But she did say you make the best apple pies. I'm like, no, I'm actually working with a company this summer to get some business experience. I get paid to show, and I like went into my approach, right? But it just helps you break the ice, like when they know you know them or you know something about them, it makes them feel more connected. And if they're more connected and they like you, they want to help you more. Cool. So it's all a full circle of like, I know more about them. I connect with them more. They like me more. They give me more people. They help them build my business stronger. They tell me about their friends. Then I go to their friends. I already know about them. I connect with them quicker. They like me more. They want to help me more. And so like, it just strengthens the whole cycle of recommendations and your business. Cool. So just so you guys know that, it's huge. So anyway, so I'm like, okay, so who are the like top, like if you were me, who are the top 5 or who are the top 10 that like, you're like, you have to see them. they would be wonderful. I'm like, what are their spouses' names, by the way? And so these are questions I always ask because I like to know this. And I'd always pronounce their name. I'm like, okay, so is it Sandra? Like make sure I can pronounce their names because some people's names are funky and you don't know, how about if Ilani, like I'm sure your name gets mispronounced all the time, like my girlfriend's name would, and so they're like, hi, is Elaine there? And you'd be like, no, because, like they don't know you if they call and said like, is Elaine there? And so I always like to say their names really quick. And I'm like, okay, so Sandra, Soraya, this, that, whatever. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all right, sweet. And what's their spouse's name? All right. And so that was the way of me asking, are they married, by the way? But I'm like, oh, what's their spouse's name? And they're like, oh, John, Julie, whatever. And I read it. I'm like, all right. They're like, oh, she's single. I'm like, oh, okay, but does she like love to cook? I'm like, is she good financially? I'm like, all right, awesome. And then what area of town are they located in? Because I do appointments everywhere and just to get myself organized. And they tell me, where they are. I make a note of that for myself. And you can just make notes on a paper, or you can make them in your app. Like I'm quicker on paper, and then I can just put it in my Excel sheet. Then I'm like, all right, Miss Sandra, awesome. I'm like, anybody home during the day? And I'd put like a D next to them or whatever. I'm like, is anybody like an early bird or a night owl? And she let me know. I'm like, cool. I'm like, who do you know that loves to shop or loves nice things? Who do you know that loves to cook or is really good at it? Who do you know that loves to entertain or throws parties all the time? And then I started asking, and who do you know who gives the best gifts? And I'm like, all right, awesome. So typically, and I put this in the wrong order, I apologize. I usually ask, if I was your son or daughter, who would you want me to go see first? I'd ask that first, and then, go through and qualify. So then once they tell me, they're like, oh, these are the top people, I'm like, Miss Susie, I'm like, I would love to meet them. Right. And so they've already told me like, oh, these are the best. They told me a little bit about them. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, Miss Christen, Miss Molly, I'm like, I would love to meet them. Like, is there any way that you could help me get in touch with those 2 or 3 people and just give them a really quick call, so that they're expecting my call? I'm like, or text. I'm like, I just think it's way more professional when people know I'm calling versus catching them out of the blue. I'm like, so many people don't pick up numbers they don't know, and if those are your top picks, I would love to meet them. And so I always like coach them on what to say and what not to say. So I actually had a sheet for that too. And I was like, because if not, they're like, oh, I have this girl selling knives. Like, do you need any new knives? And I'm like, ugh, and they'd like totally ruin it. And I'm like, no, that is not what I said, so I always like to coach them on what to say and what not to say. So originally I had this, like, I did it literally like with markers, like on a piece of paper with markers. And then this was something I was really good at when I was a top sales rep in the company. And so they had me talk on a conference about this. And so I made like a more legit one versus my like ghetto one with crayons and markers. But it basically was like what to say, what not to say, right? So when they talk to their friends for me, now nowadays, a lot of people text, right? And so we can't forget that I was a representative 15, 20 years ago. But there are some customers who prefer to call versus text. Cool. But if they want to text, that's fine. We have a sample text message you guys can give them so they can shoot them a heads up. Cool. But I always love them to call their top 2 or 3 because those were easy. Those were alley-oops. Like I could book them right when I left the house and they had already talked to them for me. And so it was the easiest, quickest, like appointment booking that I had, And so it just said like, hey, I'm here with a nice student named Cathy. She's studying international business at Palm Beach Atlantic. She's working hard towards a scholarship by showing Cutco. She can even earn college credit. She gets paid to show it. So there's no obligation to buy, would you be willing to help her out? Oh, she's actually here right now because they just hand the phone to me if I was there live. All right. If I'm there virtual, we didn't do that. So what not to say? Oh, she's selling knives. Do you need any knives? I'm like, don't talk about prices. It just sounds weird. I'm like, I'm just looking to do appointments with nice people. Cool. And they're like, okay. So just like really like guiding them. All right. So again, that's more advanced and it works real well. All right. But coach them on what to say and what not to say. I like to talk to as many on the spot. So again, this is more for your live demos. Like when they talk to them, because when they're talking to them, they're like this on the phone and they're like, oh, okay, yeah. All right. Yeah. I'll let Molly know. And when they say that, you're like this, you're like, I'm like right there. And they're like, actually, she's here right now. Do you want to talk to her? And then the ones that said yes, they just like hand the phone over. And all I would say is like, thank you so much. I'm working so hard for my goal. I actually still hadn't hit my goal for tomorrow. And I was curious if there was any chance that you could squeeze me in last minute, at blank or blank time. Right. And so like, I would just, that's it. It's just like, thank you, book them. And then I would stay busy, like polishing my knives or whatever. Cause like the fact is whenever you're done, they're done. Okay. After they book someone, like if I book somebody, I would high five them and I'm like, who's next? Right. And I would use like free stuff to help them get more yeses. So yeses were my bread and butter, and at a certain point in our business, it actually, I think it was 03. It was 0304. I don't know, but there was like a law that came out where you couldn't call people that you didn't know. The do not call registry came out, all this stuff. And it really like shook our business. And I was on a task force for this, for yeses, for like, because as long as they talk to them, we could call them. So even when we went back to normal and we could call whoever, this had become an integral part of my business. And it was awesome because like they did the work for me and it made it so easy to like book my appointments, you know. Then this, you guys need to be doing with everybody, right? And there's a sample text message in your app. You could also make your own app, okay? But you definitely want them to send a text to everybody, all right? That way they kind of warm that lead up for you. It makes it really easy. So even if you're not having them call and get you yeses, you want to make sure they're doing the heads up text message for you, okay? But again, you want to qualify to know who the best people are, so that way when you're booking appointments, you're focused on the best people. Because like Ilani, let's say you work your ass off making calls and you book up like 15 appointments, you know, for the first couple of days of the push, right? And you have those appointments. Well, if you know, you're trying to book up more demos, like let's just say like you're doing a good job getting, you know, sponsors 10, 20, whatever, off those 15 appointments. If you just focus on the top 5, you have 45 baller ass leads. And if they all know you were calling, it is so easy to get those booked up, or at least 2/3 of those, you know, like you will book the majority because they're like, oh my God, yeah, you know, like tell her to call or whatever. And so like, I love spending the time to do that because it made the rest of my time like so much more like I wasn't wasting time, right? Like it was very efficient. So this is an example text message, you know, FIU student named Mario Sabates, working on a scholarship, is going to give you a call. No obligation to get anything. He's great. It's just a quick presentation on a product called Cutco. You'll enjoy. He's awesome. You better see him, right? Like that's what Mario had his customers send to their friends. All right. And it always like made them laugh, and he like built a good rapport. He's like, did she tell you how awesome I am? And they would laugh. And she's like, she did say you were awesome. He also created his own text message, so he knew what they were saying, right? But it just like made them laugh. And then at the end of the week, and this goes to social media stuff, which, you know, we'll hit on again tomorrow. But at the end of the week, you want to update them on results, okay? Because like, so through social media, like updating, like sending a text, hey, thank you for your help this week. I was able to hit like promotion, like keeping them updated. What happens is like you establish this connection, and they really do feel like they're a part of your journey, and they're excited to continue to be a part of it. And like, maybe they go to like, I don't know, a basketball game, and they're talking to someone, and like something comes up, and they're like, oh my gosh, I have this girl, like she's working with Cutco. And they're like, oh my gosh, I need Cutco. You're like, I don't know, like just randomly things come up in conversation, but they're like, oh, I met somebody that you need to see, you know, and they'll like keep feeding you leads. And so they always have more people. So it's a really, really positive thing. Okay. So anyway, this here was bread and butter of mine for many, many years. And it's something that I haven't, you know, since we've been virtual, I haven't really taught it, you know, now that we're live again. But regardless, even being virtual, we still should be always doing the text message, right? And in the VIA recommendations, it talks about that, like asking for the top people, right? Having them send a heads up text message, like that's all there. If you guys look at it, this is just in a different format from how I used to do it, okay? But if you guys go into the approach, you know, which you guys do have, the VIA recommendations approach, and you scroll down after you ask for your recommendations, okay? All right. This is all the Facebook stuff. Let me rewind. Here we go. So after you ask for recommendations, you know, right here, it says heads up text message, right? Sending that heads up to everybody, and then taking notes for best 5, right? You guys just heard me say that. I just did it like in a different like order and stuff. It doesn't matter, but you want everyone to get a text message. You want to know who their best people are, you know, because that way you can really focus. And then what are you asking, right? It says here, how do you know them? What do you like about them? Do they cook? Do you like them, right? You can ask for whatever you want, but then you can mark their best 5 as 3-star referrals in your app, okay? And when you have notes about them, it makes it easier to build rapport. Everyone got this? So this is stuff you've had. I'm just like showing it to you in a different way. And then here it's like, hey, if you end up thinking of someone, you can pop open the app and just like put it in there. But again, like the more you keep in contact and keep updating them on what's happening, the better that's going to work. Cool. But the bonus thing here was that if you are, you know, doing any live demos, can you also have them call the top 2 or 3 people, and then maybe more, because that is money, and helps you book up, and you're typically booking a lot of their best people. Cool. So that is my tips for today. So again, are you qualifying your recommendations? Okay. Are you, and again, asking who the best people are, qualifying the recommendations, are you doing a heads up text message to everybody? Are you constantly updating on results? And if you're in person, are you having them actually call people on the spot for you that they could just hand off the phone to help you book? And you guys can offer them free stuff for that, right? And so yeses, and we call these yeses, right? They called them, they're like, hey, I had this girl, Ilani, oh, would you be willing to help her? Okay, great. Yeah, I'll have her call you. And I'm like, they're like, actually, she's here right now. You want to talk to her? And I'm like, and they'd hand the phone over and I just say, thank you, give them 2 times, and then I would high five Miss Jones and be like, awesome, Miss Jones, who's next? Right. And they would just like help me book up. And if I have a lady, like one time I had a lady that I was seeing, James and Anna Hayden. And she wrote down like 36 people for me. And then I had asked her, like, is she called the top 2 or 3, right? And I gave her the sheet. I'm like, oh, here's what to say, here's what not to say. And she was like, okay, cool. And she looks at it and she looks at me, she goes, can I just say this? Like, can I just read this? And I started laughing. I was like, yeah, absolutely. She's okay, great. So she like calls her first friend and she's like, hey, I can't talk right now. I got this girl at the house, Cathy. She's actually a student at Palm Beach Atlantic. She's working with a company, get some business experience, get paid to show product call, cut code. There's no obligation to buy, whatever. She like goes through and she's like, okay, awesome. She's going to give you a call. She's at the house right now. She's talking to John there. I don't know where they just went, but anyway, she'll call you. Like I heard her because I was in the kitchen. He was showing me his pots and pans and I was like, oh, I wanted to get the phone, but she just like kept going. She's like, all right, I'll have to call you. Bye. She calls the next person. Hey, what's up? Hey, I can't talk right now because I've got a girl at the house, but that's why I'm calling. She like goes through and she's like, okay, cool. I'm going to have her call you. Bye. And then she like calls another one. And I had asked her for 2 or 3, right? And then she goes, do you want me to call everybody? And I was like, sure. Like if anyone ever offers that, the answer is yes. Okay. I did reschedule my next appointment, but is it worth it? Hell yeah. She called all freaking 36 people. She got me 12 yeses when I was there. I booked those afterwards. I called all 12 of those and I booked them all up for times, immediately. And so like, that's a very good use of time, and it sucks. Like I missed my next appointment, but like for her to call 30 something people for me and get me 12 yeses. And by the way, those 12 yeses combined for over $10,000 in sales. That was very worth it. Cool. So just being smart with your business, making it as easy as you can for yourself. And the more you do this, the more you're qualifying leads, the more you know that you're seeing the best people, the more heads up they have, the easier it makes it for you. All right. And if you don't do it, you're going to be like hustling hard, calling like people don't know who the hell you are, and it's going to be frustrating sometimes. It is. So make it easier for yourself. And this is a great tool to help you do that.